Welcome to Thrive and Shine HR, a podcast and video series dedicated to helping us overcome the limiting beliefs, self-doubt, and imposter syndrome that so many of us HR professionals face. Here are your hosts with over 45 years experience in HR and certified life coaches, Jen and Katherine. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Thrive and Shine HR, episode number 48. As you can see, it is Jen and not Jen and Katherine today. This is going to be the first episode of Thrive and Shine HR that is just me. And Katherine, I hope, is going to come back from time to time and be a guest in some way. But in terms of the regular hosting duties, hello. Today is the day number one of me hosting the podcast on my own. So I am really, really excited to be here and also a little nervous. Change can always be hard and uncomfortable and scary and all the things, right? So today is me kind of getting off my training wheels and coming on into it, and I, can't be more grateful and more honored to have had the opportunity to co-host this show, the Thrive and Shine HR podcast and live series and video series and all the things with Katherine Fry. It was such a dream come true. And the fact that she said yes when I came to her completely randomly after she had come to one of my webinars that I had given about imposter syndrome and didn't know Katherine at all. She showed up in this webinar and we struck up a conversation, and it had been in my mind for quite some time of wanting to do a podcast. I love the idea of podcasting. I love the idea of being able to get out into a bigger universe out there and find people that you really connect with. And so after this webinar that Katherine and I met at, I reached out to her and I said, hey, would you be interested? Would you be open into doing this podcast with me? And we explored the idea and kind of continued to kind of really dig into it. And that's where Thrive and Shine HR was born. And over the course of this year, we have grown, we've evolved, we've challenged each other. We have been the closest sisters to one another. And at the end of the day, our journeys have kind of come to a pass, or, to a new chapter. And I think it's okay. I have so much gratitude and love for this year, for the experience that I got to have with Katherine, that I wouldn't trade that for like anything. So anyway, so I am super excited and am open to what the future holds with this podcast. I think one of the things that I will probably want to do is maybe at least for a while, I'm going to go bi-weekly instead of weekly. Give me a chance to kind of collect myself and figure out where all this is going. But bi-weekly seems really reasonable for me right now, especially with my other job, my work, and all these things that are going on in my life. So that's kind of where, we're at as of today. Is Thrive and Shine HR will continue. I'm going to be shifting up the model quite a bit, where I don't know if you listen to or watch Jay Shetty's On Purpose, and you've got Mel Robbins, and you've got different people that they have some episodes that it's all about like the interview and a guest and talking about somebody and helping to kind of really explore these new territories. And then some of the episodes are going to be just them, and they're really digging into an idea, a concept, a belief that maybe, we need to challenge ourselves on. And that's the type of format I think I'm going to go for with this series. So anyway, I'm super excited about it. This morning I had attempted to go live to do the weekly podcast, and it didn't work. So I spoke for a whole hour about this episode that we're about to get into, 48, and it didn't record. So after I had a chance to go to one of my AA meetings, and then I went into the soak and sauna with one of my friends, which was just so amazing. Here I am recording it a second time. Brooke Castillo, who is somebody who's one of the first people I ever learned coaching from. She wrote a book called Self-Coaching 101. If you've not seen it, check it out, especially if you're interested in how our mind works, how we can coach ourselves and be our best coach when it comes to what we think about, how we feel, how our feelings drive our actions and behaviors, and how to rewire that. So Self-Coaching 101. But anyway, one of the things that she talks about is that as you are really going through the process of challenging yourself and your beliefs and stories and things that you've got kind of continuously that come up in your brain, you have to be pretty meticulous about catching yourself. 80% of what we think about is on the back end, is like subconscious. We're not always conscious of what we're thinking about because there's so many other stimulus that's happening, especially in this day and age. Like, how often are we really, really paying attention to what we're thinking about? And I think that that's one reason why I got into meditation 9 years ago now, was because I recognized that the only way I was really going to be able to get clarity around some of this repetitive programmed thinking that's not serving me is that I need to slow myself down. And somebody with self-proclaimed ADHD, that's not an easy thing to do. So it's, been just such a tremendous journey that, this has been on with Katherine and with the podcast, because I feel like it's challenged me in so many ways to grow and to look at myself and to be more thoughtful around how I can continue to show up better. So yeah, it's been truly, just a dream for me. And so that's why I'm excited with this year coming up, that Katherine and I, we had wanted to set up themes. Every month you're going to have a different theme. And so January was mental health, and those were the episodes that we did already in January. And now February is going to be about love. It's going to be about love. And I'm going to do a bit of a spin on it, obviously, because we are HR professionals, or it's, focused on HR professionals. So, each episode is going to be like, how can we in HR really find, our love, to really tap into love when it comes to our roles. And then to be able to pull ourselves out and see the bigger picture on how it really corresponds to every area of our lives. But let's really dive into the title of the episode today was Leading with Love, a Heart-Centered Approach to HR. So what I want to do is within each episode, kind of like Kathy and I did with the podcast, is we would have different questions that would spark additional thoughts, spark how we're thinking about different things, and maybe get us to think about something a little bit differently or a little bit more more thoughtfully. And so that's what we're going to do today. I'm going to ask some questions that perhaps Kathy and I would be asking one another, and then what I want to do is propose them to the listeners, viewers, and however you are receiving this this podcast live cast. I'd love to know like how these questions resonate with those out there as well. So the first question is, what does leading with love mean to me? Oh my gosh, y'all, I went into a whole beautiful story and a beautiful weaving of how I came to recognize leading with love is the only way. Is the only way for me. Like, once you really tap into leading with love, there's no going back. And that journey has taken me a long, long time, because this year is my 25th year in HR, give and take, a couple years where I did coaching and consulting. But pretty much 25 years in the field of HR. And, what I really know to be true is that when I started to become so much more aware of how love is so critically important for me to be able to be the best possible leader I can be, the best possible person I can be, everything started to shift and change in my life. And leading with love is really about knowing myself so well first, like having such a sincere self-awareness of myself that I can go into any situation, any circumstance, any conversation, and not feel so attached to an outcome that I'm going to find myself in a situation where I'm emotionally not regulated. Like, that I get triggered in some way, that my armor goes up, that my defenses go up, that I start to feel myself getting, emotional and taking something personally. All of those things are really important signs. And the more that I've worked with myself and through coaching and through meditation and therapy and everything that I do, the more that I realize that I am genuinely my most authentic and genuine self when I am leading from a place of love. And it doesn't mean that I love you so much. I mean, in a way, I do. Like anybody that, I see who comes into my life, who, I don't feel a sense of care and kindness towards or reciprocated from. It's hard, it can be hard. But it's, for me, what I've really recognized in terms of leadership and in terms of how I want to be in my life, it's about how can I come from a place of love, care, compassion, kindness, respect, like all the things that are going to help me feel like I'm being the best possible version of myself. And so leading with love is that true integrity piece, that I'm doing my best to be as present in any given situation, in any given circumstance, without attachment to outcome, without a need to control or manipulate, without any ego, right? It's just it's just me, it's just me, and it's just trying to do my best with what we have in front of us. So that's question number 1. Question number 2 that I have in here is, what role does self-love play in my HR journey? I would say, what role does self-love play in our journey? And for me, wow, that is a very complicated question. And I think one that has a very complicated journey associated with it, of my path towards self-love, my path towards self-acceptance and self-awareness and self-compassion, self-forgiveness, self-love. So for me, that journey is it can be really quite bumpy, and it surprises me still, and will for the rest of my life. I have no doubt whatsoever, because there's so much programming that took me, 50 years, 48 years really, before, I really saw things pretty clearly. And so throughout our lives, I think we're going to have things that are going to trigger us. We're going to have things that are going to completely, throw us off our stability. And the key is, for me, what I've really realized is the key is how quickly can I get back to a place of self-love. And especially if I've stumbled, I've fumbled, I've trembled, whatever other words I can come up with, but especially when I wasn't at my best, and something happens, and now I'm self-critical, and I'm self-judging, and I'm self-sabotaging, and I know all of that really, really well. And so self-love is really, I think, the key for so many of us when it comes to world peace, when it comes to harmony, when it comes to, everything that I think we need as a society to thrive, I think begins within us. It begins within you and I. And so the more that we are distanced from a true care and compassion and love for ourselves, the more that we find ourselves in a place of perpetual suffering. And so that, recognizing that when it's come to my journey is really been so transformative, and my why. Like, it's why I reached out to Katherine. It's why this little bug inside of me said when things weren't going to work out with Katherine, you got to continue. This is not done yet. This has just begun in terms of helping people recognize it's us, right? It's within us, but it takes a long time. Like I said, for me, it's been 9 years. Oh my gosh, it's so funny. I don't know if you know the movie Ferris Bueller's Day Off, right? Do you remember in the scene where the professor is talking about Ferris being absent 9 times? So now I'm saying my journey to self-love, my journey to self-awareness and self-care and self-forgiveness and self-compassion has been 9 years in the making. So if you look at me and you hear me and you're like, wow, she seems super confident and she seems like, it takes a long time. It takes a long time, and it takes a lot of having to look myself really, really honestly and humbly in the mirror and say, okay, yeah, that's what happened. That's where I was. That's who I was. But where do I want to go? And do I truly believe in my own ability to change and to make efforts in a new direction that might serve me and serve others better? And that's the true beauty of self-love. There's no doubt in my mind about that. That's the true beauty of it. It's like, we talk so much about what is selfish, right? Is self-care selfish? Is love selfish? Our egos, in some ways, our egos try to kind of I was going to say back. Our egos try to mess with us, I think, quite a bit when it comes to self-love and self-care, right? Do you have that little voice in your head too, who basically is trying to tell you that self-love, there's something wrong with that? Like, no, not you. Not until you have this, or you do this, or you be this, or you're, oh my gosh, it's the biggest lie, and it's our ego. And so, part of my journey has truly been the compartmentalizing of my ego and my true self, my true soul. And that's really, really, really tough to do. It's really tough to do because you have to go there. You really have to go there in a way that I wasn't ready before that. And so, anyway, I go in circles sometimes, so I apologize for that, but that's one of the things I think, with Katherine, we were able to kind of keep each other in check. Now I'm going to have to keep myself in check, or when I have guests, like I hope you will consider being one. I'm going to put in the comments right now, actually, if you are interested in being a guest on the Thrive and Shine HR podcast, send me a response to this form that I am putting in the chat, and I also add to the show notes. So in this form, I want to know a little bit about you. In the interviews that I do in the coming weeks and months, they're going to be aligned with whatever theme that we have. So February's theme is going to be about love and our love for what we do, and how do we cultivate it? How do we find it if it's been lost? How do we reignite it? What do we do to truly tap into a love for what we get to do? So I hope you'll consider being a guest. So anyway, okay, next question that I have on here. What's my love language at work? So one of the things that I never considered, my husband Mike and I have been married for 21 years now, 22 coming up this year. Wow. Wow, 22 years. But the love languages thing is something that he and I have done several times. I know words of affirmation. I know physical touch for him. I know quality time for him. I know acts of service for both of us in different ways. I have a hard time receiving acts of service. I don't know about you, but I definitely struggle with that. It's something I'm working on. But I do love to give. Like when I used to work for Newman Hotel Group in Ashland, Oregon, little Ashland, Oregon, I was able to work for a leader who truly embodied servant leadership. Dawn Anway, if you're listening or watching this, thank you so much for being truly a leader that inspired me to want to give back. And that's something that I'll always have with me. And so with that, that serving, that place of service, for me has been a huge love language. And then you've got, what is it, gifts, I think, something like that. And for me, it hasn't necessarily been a huge gift person. I kind of have trouble in a way giving gifts because I'm like such a people pleaser, and I'm like, they're not gonna like it. I go crazy in my head, so then I don't do it. But yet I love receiving. So yeah, that's another one I have to work on in my brain. But the love language, I think when we talk about heart-centered leadership and leading with a love, a mindset of love, really tapping into for you and for me, like what does that mean for me in terms of what I like to receive, right, at work versus, at home? And what really fuels me? What fills my cup when it comes to giving. And for me, again, the acts of service is one. And the other one, which I got so much from Donna, who was my leader when I used to work for Northwest Salvage Corporation in Sacramento area. And Donna was amazing at words of affirmation. Like, that woman was grateful, and she meant it. Was genuine and from the heart, was so grateful to have my support, my ideas, my creativity, everything. She had a way of being able to see the good and helped bring out something that really helped spark my joy for HR. One of the first times really was from Donna, and I think that words of affirmation that she gave to me is now something that I try to do as much as I possibly can with my team. I try to do, like, we just did a huge project at work where we did a HRIS system implementation, and it was crazy. It was tough. It was hard. And yet I tried to be so intentional about communicating the gratitude that I had for Mel and everybody on the team that I had the opportunity to work with. It's really tough to do huge, big projects. And when everybody comes together and everyone aligns and communication is there and we're hitting our goals as best we can, and there's something magical about that. And I think, making sure to express that gratitude as much as I can, I just love how that feels. I love how it feels to do it, and I love how it feels to receive it. So I'm curious, pausing there for just a moment, like, what for you, what is, the love languages that you have in your workplace? What do you love to do, and how do you love to receive? So put in the comments either in the live cast or the recording later or in the podcast. It'd be really interesting to hear, and maybe I'll put a poll together when I do the drop of the podcast and get some thoughts and get some discussion going on. So, okay, so next question that we have on here is, how can I model love and respect for leadership? This one to me is it's so easy, yet it's so hard, because I know for me that for many, 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 many years, I was hiding behind the truth of how unhappy I was and how I was not being honest with myself and with others around how I was suffering. And instead of talking about it or working through it or really kind of pushing through it, excuse me, Oh my gosh, it's because I tried to record earlier today and now I'm recording a second time and my voice is gone. So sorry. But anyway, oh my gosh, where was I? Okay, now I'm drawing a blank. All right, so where I'm going with this is that I have truly and genuinely been doing my best to model the person that I most want to be when it comes to leading, when it comes to relating, when it comes to living, in my community and in my life. And it's all about when I really started to pay attention day to day, right? So, and kind of going back, let me pause for a second, and I think now's a good time to tell a story. Let's do story time. So, for those who may have heard this story before, sorry, but it might help to hear it again. So I first was turned on to meditation 9 years ago by a gal I worked with, Ava, at the same place I worked with Dawn, Newman Hotel Group. And Ava was our director of food and beverage. I was the human resources director, and she was someone who was in one of the most high stress jobs there was. I mean, I could not imagine a job. Well, executive chef, there's a lot of jobs, but there was something about Ava where she had a calm to her. She had a presence to her. It was almost like just being in her presence slowed me down. You know that kind of person where just being in their presence, you're like, you almost feel like you can breathe a little bit easier. And from 2016 to now, we're still great friends. Ava has been that presence in my life. And very quickly, I would say by 2017, I was starting to really inquire, how do you do it? What's your trick? Like, what is it that you do that helps you to not lose your shit like all the time? And it came down to meditation, and it came down to mindfulness. And for her, the way that she explained it at the time was really about mindfulness was the practice, the active practice of being able to stay emotionally grounded regardless of the triggering circumstances. And it was beautiful when she explained it to me then, and still it resonates with me so strongly because I was at that time out of control. I was drinking all the time. I had anger issues. I was doing pretty darn good at my job because when I showed up, especially when it was money related, I knew how to show up. So all my energy, if you think about like every single one of us in any given day, we only have so much in our tank when it comes to energy. And when I was really going hard in my life during that time when I was working at Newman Hotel Group, I was putting all my energy into my work. I was putting all my energy into wanting to be the best I possibly could professionally. And yet when I would come home in the evening, as soon as I would walk in the door, I would run for the box of wine. I would run for whatever I had that could help numb me and could help calm me down because mommy needs a break. Mommy's tired. And my son is now 17 and I'm now several months sober, and it's been quite the ride of now looking at myself very clearly, very openly, and being able to see the truth of what, how much I was secretly suffering, and yet believing that by, having the glass or two of wine or 3 or 4, then I would be much more playful, how sometimes, I don't know if you drink or not, but if you do drink, you know what I mean? Like there's this sense of belief that it's going to help loosen me up. It's going to make me playful. It's going to make me a little bit less, stressed and overwhelmed. But really at the end of the day, it causes so many other issues that it's not, it just wasn't worth it for me in my life. And for recognizing now that I'm really starting to understand what love truly is and how it must be given unconditionally to myself first before I can truly be able to give it to anybody else. I mean, truly, authentically, and genuinely, it's changed everything. And so I think modeling love means making sure you've done the work yourself, that if there's anything ever that's triggering you or upsetting you or causing your defenses to go up, that's an opportunity. It's an opportunity to look inward and say, okay, what is going on within myself that I'm now armored up, that I'm now putting up my defenses, that I'm now seeing myself as a victim? Like, what is that creating that discord within myself? And then being really willing to recognize how where your role might be in that. And so yeah, I think as I've taken so much time to go through that, I'm still very, very aware of how much work that I still need to do and how far I still have to go. And that's exciting to me now. And that's another reason why this podcast just had to continue, because I know without a shadow of a doubt that my why has to do with continuing to explore this for myself and then being able to pass along to others how others can find their way as well. So, oh, goodness. Wow. Like when it comes to the journey of love, and when it comes to what love really, really means, when I say, an unconditional love for myself, I really, really mean that. And that's something that has taken me to get some bumps, some bruises, and some serious scars in my life to finally get to that point where I could say that unequivocally that I would always make sure that I recognize that I am in my integrity and that I am loving myself enough that I don't allow others or situations to mistreat or misuse or the things that I think sometimes that we would do. And that has been such a tremendously hard journey, because at the end of the day, if we're being super honest with ourselves, in order to truly love ourselves unconditionally, it means to have our own back. It means to speak up for ourselves if we're being mistreated. It means to act in our values, to be honest, to be fair, to be respectful, to try to help others in different ways in our lives, to really show up with intention to be the best we possibly can be. And so the journey of self-love, I think, really begins with recognizing that it's gonna be tough, at times. We're not always going to be in a place where others are feeling the love towards us. And so it's harder to feel love towards ourselves when others are frustrated with us or angry or they're disappointed with us or whatever else. You can look at any professional or personal relationship dynamic, in your life, and you can recognize those times and those individuals where it feels this strain that you keep coming back to, the strain that causes that relationship from really being able to move on to the next level. And so partially when I really talk with people and when I really try to encourage people around the concept of self-love, it's asking ourselves the tough questions around, with these relationships that we struggle with, when we have these perpetual dynamics that continue to pop up in our lives over and over again, how are we asking the questions around what really is kind of creating that perpetual discord? And for so many of us, it really is going to come down to whether or not we think that we are good enough, that we're smart enough, that we're old enough or too old or just enough, right? And whether or not we think that we're worthy, and whether or not we believe in our potential to do more, or to be more, to have more, to want more. And I think all of those doubts and all of those insecurities cause us to put into question that unconditional love for ourselves. Because the self, the part of yourself that truly does love yourself unconditionally, they also know that you are worthy. You're worthy of being accepted. You're worthy of belonging. You're worthy of true joy. And so I think that, many times we find ourselves in, relationships, we find ourselves in work situations, we find ourselves, we didn't decide how we were born and how we were raised. And so many of us were programmed from a very early age to tolerate certain behaviors, tolerate certain attitudes, and in order to really be able to truly fully get to a place of self-love, you have to recognize where perhaps you've tolerated things that a person who truly loves themselves would not. And that's a heartbreaking thing to have and to recognize in our lives is those people in relationships that perhaps we didn't really see clearly because we really wanted it to be so much different. Yeah, family and people we love or really want to love, right? That we want to believe in. We want to believe the best in them based on what they say, based on who they are, based on the role they represent, the mom or the dad, or love you, mom and dad. I don't mean my mom and dad, but I mean in so many other relationships with their parents and with others that, because of what messages they received from the time that they were very, very little around whether or not they were good enough, whether they were worthy, whether or not they were, whether they belonged or whether or not they were excluded. All of those messages perpetuate throughout our lives. So many of us go through our lives with all of these narratives that we're not fully aware of. And I think that I talked about this already this morning, but because that didn't record, and I'm hoping that I didn't already talk about this in this recording, but who cares? So at any given time, human beings are only fully conscious of about 80, no, we have subconscious thinking about 80% of the time. So we're only fully conscious of what we're thinking about around 20% of the time. So for many of us who've been programmed so many self-limiting beliefs and so many, things that have just been building within us that are not serving us, it's really hard to really know that they're happening. And so many of us are not quite fully aware of that behind the scenes narrative. We don't realize it. And that's where, meditation and working with Ava 9 years ago was so transformative for me. And when I left Newman Hotel Group, then I went to work for Dutch Bros, and I worked for Dutch Bros Coffee for 3 years. And I was at Dutch Bros Coffee when COVID hit. And so if you've heard this story, then you already know this as well, but that's okay. I'm kind of blending different stories. I'm having a good time here. So when COVID hit, I was working at Dutch Bros, and I started to, with the meditation that I'd been doing for a few years now, it started to come together around our own perpetual suffering and how much we all get caught. I mean, even in Dutch Bros, which is like, in terms of work environments, it truly was inclusive and it was caring and respectful in so many ways. I mean, it had its issues, trust me, but for the most part, they were dialed in. Yet the suffering was there. all the time. And what you really started to recognize is it was self-imposed, right? Catherine and I would call it the self-imposed shitstorm, this storm, right? And that's the reality of it, is we all have it, right? To what degree is going to be very different from one person to the next. But I started to realize that even with meditation, my self-imposed shitstorms were going all the time. So during COVID, I went from a 45-minute each way commute to Dutch Bros to nothing. And so being able to have that commute now down to nothing was a really good opportunity for me to do something new and do something that I felt like could really help me help others when it came to our own perpetual suffering and shitstorms. So I got certified as a life coach, and this happened towards the end of 2020, and then I got my certification in 2021. And in 2021 is when I decided to jump ship and leave Dutch Bros as a director of HR, or actually HR business partner at that time. And I decided to go on my own and be a coach. And I said, I got this. I know how I'm going to be able to help people. I know exactly what I'm going to be able to do. And I got out there, and my own self-imposed craziness kicked in, especially when it came to financial insecurity, scarcity, not enoughness with, paying, what I charge for people, what I ask, and feeling worthy of that. I had no idea that those types of crazy thoughts were going to come in my mind. But now, in retrospect, I could totally see that would be coming, given the childhood I had, given the challenges that I faced when I was younger. Of course, I would feel lack. Of course, I would struggle with it. So, long story short, being and doing the coaching instead of working full time, it changed me so much that even though I struggled tremendously with my fears and my self-doubts and my limitations, I also pushed myself through barriers that I never really even knew existed for myself. And it was a transformative experience for me, where I kind of found my way. I learned a lot about what it meant to be there for myself, to be grounded in myself, to be understanding of who I was without feeling like I needed to impress, or, that it was constantly like me trying to be something for someone else, which is really how I spent my entire 20 years in HR before that. All throughout, that's how I was. I was a chameleon. I had pride in the fact that as an HR professional, I was a chameleon. And yet it wasn't so super true to the root of who I was. And I started to see that now that I was on my own through coaching, because in coaching others, when I started to really give back in that way and help others understand their brain, help others to be able to see themselves and see the truth of who they are and who they really could be if they put in the effort, I was forced to have to see myself with clarity in a mirror that I had no way to back away from. And that shifted my perspective of what self-love meant. It shifted it completely, because now I was starting to really truly embody something that before I was just kind of faking it until you're making it. So what an exciting thing, right? You remember when you rode a bike the first time, or anything you do on the first time, or for several times sometimes, it feels wobbly. Eventually it gets better. And that's how I feel about self-love. I think all of the doubts, all of the narratives, all of the stories around it's selfish or it's ego-driven, or that you're not worth it and you're not good enough, all of that bullshit, when I've put it aside and really truly went all in on what I know self-love to be, game changer. Complete and total game changer. So in terms of what happened, after that, when I was now unemployed and working on my own as a coach, trying to build that up, but now really starting to get dialed into what it meant to love myself, have compassion for myself, have forgiveness for myself. And at the end of the day, it also caused me to shift pretty significantly in relationships that I've had with people all my life. Some good, some not so good. And a lot of it really had to do with my clarity within myself around what I feel like is okay and not okay. You know, that I saw something that I think it was Oprah or somebody else, they basically said, so if you go into a situation, you go into a circumstance and it doesn't feel right, trust it, or trust that something is off, right? You know, so often we question it, and some of us, you know, will really poo-poo it altogether. And I think it's important to question those spidey senses and say, wonder what that's about. And then on the flip side of that, if you go into a situation and you just meet somebody new, or you go into a new environment and you feel that energy, right? You feel something magnetizing through you. Trust it. Trust that. Because I think we are all here on this planet and in this experience to be able to find those that we really magnetize to. And I definitely had that with Kathy, and I have that in so many ways. And, you know, my boss, I could go on and on about the different relationships that I have where that magnetism really, really matters. And when it comes to heart-centered leadership, when it comes to leading with love, there also has to be safety, trust, and respect. So, you know, these for me are almost my core principles. You know, like I want to be able to continue down that path and know that whatever job I'm in, whatever relationship I'm in, however it is that I am showing up in my life, that for me, what truly matters is to be able to have some reciprocation and some understanding of what really matters, right? That love, that care, that respect, that safety, and know that right now on this universe and in this world, there's a lot of discord. There's a lot of us versus them. There's a lot of black and white. There's a lot of things that are not so pretty. And I think it's really important now more than ever that we take a deep breath, that we continue to show up for one another, that I continue to show up for this podcast, and I continue to, you know, do my best to be here and be, you know, the best servant that I possibly can be in this community. So I wanted to share with you real quick, because February's theme is all about love. I have some earrings, so if you're listening to this, you're not able to see, but that's okay, you can hear me. So I have some earrings of hearts, and then I'm wearing some pink, and I got a little Dutch love going on here. So the theme of love, again, you know, I think I want to be really careful around, you know, going into a place of being fake, being disingenuous, trying to put out there an energy or a sense of yourself that is not you. And, you know, it's really important that I have recognized that in my journey in HR, the more that I can dial in within myself, that I'm aligned, that I'm not trying to show up, you know, I'm not trying to kind of fake a whole lot. I think very rarely, sometimes it's really important when it's something new, you know, and then once you get past the newness of it, just like riding a bike, then at that point it's like, okay, Missy, so you've done it 10 times. And that's it's kind of a rule of thumb that I give myself, is I'm like, give it 10 tries. Give it 10 tries, and if after 10 tries you're not seeing improvement or growth or evolution, then let it go. And so I think that that's a good rule of thumb with a lot of things. but it's also important to be, specific around, what does that look like for you? What does progress look like for you? What does growth look like for you? And making sure then you've got your back in terms of what are those checkpoints, so anyway, okay, well, I am so grateful for, this podcast. And again, it is tremendously bittersweet to not have Katherine here. It's tremendously bittersweet to hear the intro at the beginning and to not have her beautiful smile and face to be able to laugh with and to connect with, and her brilliance around neuroscience and, all of that is unmatched. So if you haven't already, please make sure to check out her HR Empower Hour. Make sure to check out, Katherine Fry Coaching or Marble Peak Coaching, and really take a look at what she does. If you miss her and her energy, you do not have to miss her very long, because she has so much going on all the time. So definitely check out her stuff. Okay, so with that, before I check off myself, I want to talk about a couple of things that I've got coming up. And one of them is that I am going to be doing a 6-month series that's coming up. It's one time a month for 1 hour on Fridays beginning February 28th at 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern. I'm going to put a link here in the comments. Let me do that right now. And I will do that for those of you who are listening to the podcast. We'll put it in the show notes. But anyway, so the art of meaningful conversations. I really, really believe that we are conversating with one another all the time. I mean, I'm conversating with you, even if I can't see you, I can feel you. I can feel a lot of you out there. Aren't sure about me, maybe, but I think we conversate a lot. We conversate verbally, we conversate with our nonverbal, we conversate in our writing. All of it is in how we are communicating and relating to one another. And either it's filling up those tanks that we have, when it comes to the bridges between ourselves and others, or it's depleting those tanks. And so this 6-part series is with a really good friend of mine, Laura King. Laura King is a fellow coach. She's been in the HR field for many, many, many years as well. She now does training through Colluminate and was working in the cooperative industry just like I am now. So we bonded through an HR monthly forum that we do, which is all about self-care and mental health care and that sort of thing. And so from there, we built this concept of wanting to put something together that really can help people understand how they might be holding themselves back, and how when we struggle, when we have those relationship dynamics with others that are really difficult, that are really strainful, that are really, exhausting, and it really can be difficult for us to feel like we are making progress in some of those relationships in our lives, that there are different tools that are out there that Laura and I are just really excited to be able to pass along to our listeners and viewers of this program. So anyway, check it out. The link is in the comments on that one. And then lastly is coming up on February 15th, which is just in less than 2 weeks. I'm going to be doing a free webinar, and it is, let me find it. I wrote it out. So it's called Rekindling the HR Spark, 5 Trends to Reignite Your Passion, HR Passion. But really, it's like 5 trends to help reignite your passion in general. And one of the things that I know to be true is that when we get caught in this loop around New Year's resolutions and really hitting our goals hard, and we're doing all of these things to try to kickstart ourselves, so often I think we're looking at it from a perspective that really keeps us from being able to miss the core, that self-love core that we talked about throughout this whole episode, that core. So that's what we're going to be talking about in this webinar. And I invite you to come. It's the day after Valentine's Day, 7 a.m. Pacific, 8 a.m. Mountain, 10 a.m. Eastern time. And we're going to let me read a little bit to you about the program. So, have you ever felt like HR has lost a bit of its magic? You're not alone, but the good news is there are powerful shifts happening in our field that are making us fall in love with HR all over again. Join me the day after Valentine's Day for a lively and interactive group discussion where we'll discuss and explore the latest trends that are reigniting our passion for the work we do. So we'll dive into creating meaningful change in our workplaces. Again, I truly believe that when we do that work on ourselves and that self-love, that true check-in with ourselves around, do I believe in myself? Do I think I'm worthy? Do I believe that I'm worthy of love? Really, really, really going there and working through that, the change that we can create in our workplaces is next level. It's completely next level because, and I've shared this on the podcast several times, that me as an HR person 5 years ago is completely different than me as an HR person now. And it's because I've now gone all in on this concept of self-love and self-care and self-awareness and self-accountability and all of it. I've gone all in. And because I've gone all in terms of my HR practice, I now no longer hold myself back or hold back from really being honest about the things that need to be said, about the things that need to be done, and it really helps me show up in such a more authentic and genuine way. How do we prioritize mental health in our teams? I think it starts with us, right? When we are prioritizing that self-care time for ourselves and not seeing it as selfish and recognizing the importance of it, celebrating it. Like I celebrate to my work family that I go to therapy. I'm like, Jen's going to therapy. It's lunchtime. She's going to therapy. And that's like, wow, what a great thing that I know that I'm giving others is the permission to be able to say, oh, if she is recognizing the need to take care of herself and get some, oh, I just remembered, you see? I got my hair did the other day, and I've got some red in it. So perfect for Valentine's Day, right? To have the funky red in my hair for Valentine's Day. So anyway, oh my goodness, I got off on a tangent. Okay, so basically, I want to be able to really create a movement of women and anybody in any field, but HR specifically, and create a movement of those who are willing to show up for ourselves, to recognize the monumental power of self-love and self-care, to being the catalyst of the best possible impact that we can make in our lives, whether it's at work or at home. And so that's my mission and my goal. And so in doing, this webinar is really about how do we find that spark for you? Like if you're not feeling it at work right now, come anyway. Let's talk about where you can find the spark within yourself, right? We're really going to talk about that because I think the fear of what that may bring up and the fears and the anxieties, yeah, it's all potentially going to be there. It could get pretty raw, but it also is going to be so freeing, so liberating, so refreshing to be able to shed ourselves of this former version who just wasn't aware enough to be able to recognize how much better they could start showing up today. Right now. So we're going to do that, and we're going to talk about that and what that means, and by reigniting the spark that's within our own hearts. So let me finally I need to get that link. Okay. I'm so silly. Oh my goodness. Okay. Okay, so I just shared that. So, all right, so those are some things going on with me. And, again, like I shared earlier, I think probably bi-weekly for a while for the podcast. And so that means that I may do an episode next week if I'm able to get a guest. So go into the the links that I shared and the form for being a guest, because if you are interested to talk about your love for HR and how you've been able to find your way to lead with your heart and lead with love, I'd love to talk with you, definitely. So fill out that form and consider coming on being a guest. And if I can grab somebody before next Sunday, I might do it and go live next Sunday, February 9th at 7 a.m. Pacific. Hopefully we'll be able to go live. Again, dealing with Riverside has created some interesting challenges that I didn't anticipate, but that's okay. We're gonna make our way through it. We're gonna figure this out. We are, resilient, and it's part of the journey, right? Is to learn new, to grow, to continue to try to figure out where this all might be taking me, but to try to have a smile on my face as much as I possibly can as I get knocked along the way. So with that, I just want to invite you to consider, if you know of anybody in the HR field, if you know of somebody in a SHRM group, or someone you work with, or someone you used to work with, someone you went to school with, who really could use a dose of self-love and recognizing the power of love for oneself in how they can show up as their best, share this episode with them. And share the podcast too with them, because this podcast is something that is truly, truly just so special to my heart, because what it means to me is the gift that I hope to be able to continue to give until I'm at least 70, which is like 20 years. I want to have this podcast. I'm not kidding. So I love you. I am so grateful for this community. I know that there are only, 10 listeners or viewers right now, but it's going to grow. Sam and I are on the case. We're going to figure out how to get it to grow, how to get a bigger audience, how to really find those who believe in thriving and shining when it comes to our life and our work. So with that, don't forget, it's never I said that wrong. Oh my gosh. You always have a new opportunity to thrive and shine in HR. Thank you so much for joining me today. Thank you for episode 48. Episode 49 is coming soon, and I look forward to continuing to grow, evolve, and unconditionally love ourselves. Have a wonderful day, and thank you for joining. Bye now.